The air in Savannah was heavy that day, not with rain, but with a kind of still heat that made the skin feel like it didn't belong to you. Maybe that was fitting because nothing about that day felt like it belonged to me either. I stood in the middle of the grand garden of the Whitmore estate, surrounded by white roses, flickering candles, and strangers who smiled as if they knew me. I was wearing a dress that had been chosen for me, makeup I didn't recognize in the mirror, and a name on the marriage certificate that no longer felt like mine. I was about to marry a man I barely knew. His name was Damon Whitmore. A millionaire with cold eyes, a sharp mind, and a reputation for never looking back. They said he built his empire before turning 30, that he never forgave a betrayal, and that he didn't believe in love. So, of course, he made the perfect husband. At least, for someone like me, an orphan, a virgin, a bride of convenience. My older brother had raised me after our parents died. He did the best he could, but we barely made it through the years. And when his bad business decisions caught up with him, it wasn't his own future he bargained with, it was mine. Damon can take care of you, he told me, eyes heavy with shame. Better than I ever could. I wanted to scream that I didn't need someone to take care of me. I needed someone to see me. But I stayed quiet, like I always did. The ceremony was supposed to be private, elegant, intimate, but nothing felt intimate when everyone was watching me, expecting me to smile, to walk, to say, "I do," like I wasn't being handed off like a package no one had ever opened. I walked down the aisle slowly, my shoes biting into the skin behind my heels. The dress, although stunning, clung too tightly around my ribs. My chest felt compressed, my hands trembling beneath the bouquet. I looked up and saw him. Damon Whitmore stood at the altar like a man carved out of stone. Perfectly tailored black suit, no smile, no warmth, just presence. His eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. He didn't look away. He didn't look amused either. I was shaking. My heart wasn't pounding, it was stumbling. The minister's voice faded in and out as my mind tried to cling to the moment. The words didn't reach me. All I could feel was the heat. Too much heat. When it was time to say my vows, my lips moved, but my voice barely followed. "I do," I whispered, unsure if anyone even heard it. Damon didn't hesitate. "I do," he said, clearly, coldly. There was a clap, a cheer, someone's forced smile, and then it hit me like a wave crashing against a fragile window. My vision blurred, my knees softened, the corners of the world tilted. The pressure in my chest tightened. Everything felt distant, as if I had slipped beneath the surface of warm water and couldn't breathe. I remember the bouquet falling first, then the sound of someone gasping, and then nothing. Just black. The kind of black where even dreams don't exist. Before we begin, a quick note: this video is a work of fiction, intended for mature audiences. It contains suggestive themes and passionate storytelling designed for entertainment purposes only. There is no explicit content, violence, or real events depicted here. Viewer discretion is advised. If you're ready for a thrilling romantic tale, sit back and enjoy. I woke to softness, the scent of crisp linen, the distant hum of air conditioning, a weightless silence I didn't recognize. My eyelids fluttered open slowly, still heavy. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then I sat up and realized I wasn't wearing my wedding dress anymore. Instead, I was draped in a white shirt, oversized, crisp. It fell just above my knees. The fabric smelled faintly of something clean, expensive, and unmistakably male. My heart skipped. I looked around. The room was vast, tastefully decorated in grays and creams with tall windows framed by sheer curtains that let in soft rays of golden afternoon light. On the far end, a glass of water sat on a nightstand beside an untouched vase of white peonies. Where was I? And then I remembered: the wedding, the heat, the dizziness, the bouquet falling, darkness, and now this. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, my bare feet touching the cool wooden floor. My dress was nowhere in sight. Panic surged through me for a second until the door opened. Damon Whitmore stepped in, black shirt rolled up at the sleeves, no tie, expression unreadable. "You're awake," he said flatly. I pulled the shirt tighter around me. "What happened?" "You fainted at the altar." "I remember some of it," I mumbled. He took a step forward but didn't approach fully. "You were overheated. Probably hadn't eaten." I nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. "You're fine now," he added. I dared to look up. "Why am I wearing your shirt?" Damon's face remained unreadable. "You passed out. Your dress was soaked. You couldn't breathe. I told the staff to remove it. I gave you mine." His voice didn't change, but something in it felt less cold. "You changed me?" He shook his head. "No. I had one of the maids do it." Relief washed over me, followed by a strange kind of embarrassment. I clutched the fabric tighter against my skin. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded once and turned to leave. But before he did, he paused at the door. "You should eat something. Dinner is at 7 o'clock downstairs. You'll find clothes in the closet. My housekeeper had them arranged." Then he was gone, leaving me there in his room, wearing his shirt, feeling like nothing made sense. I sat for a long time, staring at the glass of water beside me. My throat was dry, but I couldn't move. There was something intimate about being in someone else's space, especially someone like him. Why had he done that? Damon Whitmore wasn't known for kindness or softness. He was known for closing deals, for owning half the luxury hotels on the eastern seaboard, and for walking out of boardrooms without looking back. And yet, he had noticed I couldn't breathe. He had told someone to change me, covered me with his own shirt. He had made sure I was okay. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew how it made me feel, seen. And for a girl who had grown up being overlooked, that was more dangerous than anything else. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that fills the spaces between two strangers forced to share a table for reasons neither of them fully accepted. I had changed into a simple cream-colored dress the housekeeper left in the closet. It fit perfectly, which meant it had been tailored ahead of time, planned, calculated, just like everything else in this marriage. When I entered the dining room, Damon was already seated at the long mahogany table. He didn't look up when I arrived, just motioned silently to the chair across from him. There were no candles, no flowers, just 2 plates, 2 sets of silverware, and the soft clinking of crystal water glasses. I sat down, unsure where to place my hands. The food was already served: roasted vegetables, grilled salmon, and a wild rice medley that looked far too elegant for someone who had grown up eating canned soup. He finally looked up. "You should eat." I nodded, picking up the fork. A few bites in, I realized I hadn't spoken a word since I entered the room, and neither had he, not really. He chewed slowly, each motion measured, like his entire life had been trained for self-control. After a few more moments of heavy silence, he asked, "How do you feel?" I looked up, surprised by the question. "Better, thank you." He gave a small nod. "You need to stay hydrated." I nodded again. "I know." Another pause. "You fainted," he said. "That's not something to brush off." I bit my lip. I think I was just overwhelmed. His eyes met mine, piercing and unreadable. "You should have said something." My hands trembled slightly under the table. I didn't want to ruin anything. That caught his attention. "Ruin the wedding," I said quietly. Damien set his fork down. "It wasn't a celebration." I froze. "It was a contract," he continued, "dressed in flowers and champagne." The way he said it so matter-of-fact made my chest ache, not because it wasn't true, but because something in me needed to know more. "So why did you make it so beautiful?" I asked, barely above a whisper. He paused, then said, "Because I may not believe in love, but I do believe in presentation." His honesty hit me like a cold wave. We ate the rest of the meal in silence. After dinner, he stood. "The house is yours to explore. You'll find it's very quiet. I keep it that way." I noticed, I replied, managing a small smile. He looked at me, then really looked, for the first time since I'd woken up. You don't talk much, he said. I don't have much to say, I answered. He tilted his head slightly. Or maybe no one's asked the right questions. And then, without another word, he turned and left the room. I remained there for a moment, hands resting lightly on the linen napkin in my lap, trying to process what had just happened. That night, as I lay in the guest bedroom, large, immaculate, and almost too quiet, I couldn't sleep. Even though we had barely spoken, even though we were strangers under the same roof, I had felt something shift. Not in him, in me. I was starting to care about the man I was supposed to endure, and that was the most dangerous feeling of all. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was still quiet, like it was holding its breath. I wrapped myself in a soft shawl and wandered through the corridors until I found the conservatory, glass walls, green plants, the scent of early jasmine in the air. I sat on the small bench near the window and watched the sky turn from slate to soft gold. It was the first peaceful moment I'd had since the ceremony, and maybe in much longer. A quiet cough startled me. I turned. Damien stood at the entrance, dressed in a dark pullover, barefoot, a cup of coffee in his hand. His hair was slightly mussed, as if he hadn't expected to be seen like this. You're up early, he said. So are you, I replied softly. He nodded once and walked in, his steps careful on the tile. Couldn't sleep. Me neither, I said, gesturing to the bench. May I? I nodded, scooting slightly to make room, though there was plenty of space. He sat, not too close, not too far, just enough. We sat in silence for a moment, then he surprised me. This used to be my mother's favorite room, he said, his voice low. She'd come here at sunrise. Said it made the rest of the day quieter. I glanced at him. She sounds like she was lovely. He didn't answer right away. She was too good for this house. I didn't ask more. The silence between us was softer now, not empty, but shared. After a while, I whispered, Do you always eat dinner alone? He tilted his head slightly. Usually, people talk too much. I smiled faintly. And I don't. He looked at me, really looked. No. You listen. His words stayed with me the rest of the day. We didn't speak much more, but that night, he didn't leave the dining room right after the meal. Instead, he lingered, sipping his wine, asking small questions, nothing too deep, but more than before. I told him about the bookstore I used to visit as a child, about how I always read the last page of a book first. I need to know if it's worth the heartbreak, I said. He didn't laugh, but he didn't scoff either. Makes sense. But sometimes, the heartbreak is the point. Another night, I mentioned how I missed baking, how I used to make cinnamon rolls for my brother when we couldn't afford anything else. 2 days later, a small basket of fresh cinnamon sticks appeared in the kitchen. He never said it was him. I never asked, but I knew. And slowly, I began to see him, not as a cold contract in a tailored suit, but as a man who had built walls so high, no one had tried to look over them in years. Until now. One evening, after another quiet dinner, he surprised me again. I have meetings in Charleston tomorrow, he said. Would you like to come? I blinked. With you? He nodded. It's not a vacation, but the view from the hotel is nice. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't an invitation with roses or poetry, but it was something. I said yes. That night, I couldn't sleep again. But for the first time, it wasn't fear keeping me awake, it was hope. Charleston was beautiful. It smelled like old money and fresh salt water, and the hotel he took me to overlooked the marina, with its neat rows of sailboats and swaying palms. It wasn't romantic, not on purpose, but it was quiet, elegant, calming, the kind of place you go when you want to be someone else for a while. Damien's meeting stretched into the afternoon, and I wandered the hotel's shaded garden paths, watched the water sparkle under the sun, and sat by the window of the cafe, slowly sipping tea like I belonged there. When he returned, jacket off, sleeves rolled, that faint exhaustion behind his sharp expression, he looked more like a man and less like a legend. "I thought you'd be bored," he said. "I wasn't," I answered. "There's peace in being invisible sometimes." He didn't smile, but he looked like he understood. That evening, we had dinner on the terrace. The candlelight flickered between us, and he poured my glass first, a small gesture, but one I noticed. Halfway through the meal, he asked, "Have you ever been in love?" The question caught me off guard. I shook my head. "No, not really." He tilted his glass thoughtfully. "Good. It's easier that way." I looked at him. "Easier?" He nodded. "To live. To leave. To rebuild." I didn't say anything, but inside me, something ached. Because I had never been in love, not the kind in books, not the kind in movies. But I was starting to feel something now, for a man I didn't understand. A man who didn't believe in love. A man who thought I was just a convenience. And that's when the guilt started growing. Because he didn't know the truth, that I hadn't lied outright, but I hadn't been honest either. He didn't know I was still untouched, that no one had ever come close to me. That this wasn't just a first marriage, but the first time I'd ever shared space, breath, silence with a man. And now, I was falling for him. Every glance, every small act, every quiet moment we spent, not talking, but simply being in the same room, stitched themselves into the fabric of my heart. But what would he do if he found out that the girl he married for peace had a secret wrapped in silence? That I wasn't just reserved or modest, that I was still a virgin, and I was terrified of what that meant. That night, back in the hotel room, I couldn't sleep. I stood by the balcony, watching the boats move slightly in the dark water below. Damon was sitting at the desk, reading something on his laptop. He hadn't spoken since we returned from dinner. After a long pause, he said, without looking up, "You can ask me anything." I turned slowly. "What?" "You've been watching me," he said, holding back. "If you want to ask something, ask." My breath caught. I wanted to ask everything. Why did you agree to this marriage? Do you regret it? Would you still want me if you knew I was untouched? But all I said was, "Why don't you believe in love?" He paused, then closed the laptop gently. "Because I've seen what people do in its name," he said. "And I've never seen it save anyone." I wanted to say, maybe it's not supposed to save, maybe it's just supposed to see us. But I didn't. I wasn't ready yet, and my heart wasn't strong enough to watch his eyes change when I told him the truth. Not yet. The ride back to Savannah was quiet. Damien had meetings early, so we left the hotel just after sunrise. The sky was still painted in soft pinks and golds, and the roads were nearly empty. He didn't speak much, eyes on the road, fingers tapping absently against the steering wheel. I watched him out of the corner of my eye, the sharp lines of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders, the way he blinked slower when the sun came through the windshield. I wondered if he knew, if he had started to sense the truth I was too afraid to say. When we returned to the estate, the silence between us stretched into the hallway, the stairs, even the air. He disappeared into his office, and I wandered to the garden. The lavender had started to bloom. I crouched near it, brushing my fingers across the petals, breathing in their soft scent. Something about the simplicity of it grounded me, reminded me that life existed outside of secrets and contracts. But that peace didn't last. That night, after dinner, Damon poured 2 glasses of wine and motioned for me to follow him into the lounge. I hesitated but followed. He sat near the fireplace, the flames low and crackling. I sat across from him, holding the glass with both hands. "You've been quieter than usual," he said, watching the fire. "I'm always quiet." "Not like this." I looked down at the wine. "I guess I've just been thinking." He turned slightly toward me. The question lingered in the air like perfume. I didn't answer right away, then I asked, "Have you ever done something you thought was right, but it still felt like lying?" His eyes didn't blink. "Many times." I nodded slowly. And if the other person found out, what then? That depends, he said. Was the lie meant to protect you, or them? I looked at him. Both. His jaw tightened just slightly. Then it's a dangerous lie. My throat burned. I set the glass down. He leaned forward, arms on his knees. What aren't you telling me? I froze. My mind raced. My hands trembled. Then I stood up. I think I need air. He didn't stop me. I stepped out onto the veranda, the night breeze brushing my skin like whispers. I walked to the edge, gripped the railing, and looked up at the stars. They were cold, bright, distant, just like Damien, except not tonight. I heard his footsteps behind me, soft against the stone. You say you don't have to tell me, he said, his voice lower than the wind. But whatever it is, it's already affecting us. I turned to him slowly. The firelight from inside flickered against his face, casting soft shadows beneath his cheekbones. I didn't lie, I said. But I never corrected what you assumed. He waited. I've never been with anyone before, I whispered. Not even close. His eyes flickered just once. I didn't want to say it because I didn't want to seem naive, or worse, like I was trying to turn this into something it's not. He didn't move. I thought maybe if I just played the part, I'd eventually feel like I belonged in this story. But I don't. Still no words, then finally he asked. Why now? Because it's starting to matter, I said, my voice cracking. Because you're starting to matter. Silence. Then he stepped closer, not to reach for me, not to speak, but just to be near. In that closeness, I felt something shift. Not pity, not judgment, just presence. The kind that stays even when everything else begins to fall apart. The next morning, something had changed. I felt it before I even opened my eyes, in the way the air moved, in the quiet hum of the house, in the warmth of the light slipping through the curtains. I didn't know what I expected after telling him the truth, but I hadn't expected this peace. When I came downstairs, Damien was already at the breakfast table, but this time he looked up when I entered, not just a glance, he saw me. Good morning, he said, his voice softer than usual. Good morning, I replied, a little breathless. There was coffee already poured for me. A small bowl of fruit, toast with cinnamon and honey, like the kind I'd told him I used to make. I sat, trying not to read too much into it. I have no meetings today, he said. Oh, I thought we could take a walk. The back gardens are better in the morning. My heart tripped. He wasn't pretending to be affectionate, he wasn't performing romance. He was present, real, honest. So we walked. He told me about the trees his mother planted, how she loved lilacs. I told him about the swing I used to have in our backyard when I was 10 and how I imagined it would take me somewhere far if I just swung high enough. We talked like people who had known each other longer than a contract. And for the first time since I stepped into this arrangement, I laughed out loud, unfiltered. He looked at me like it surprised him, like maybe he'd never heard real laughter in that house before. Later that day, I found myself in the music room, sitting by the grand piano. I didn't play, but I pressed the keys softly, letting the notes echo through the empty space. He appeared in the doorway, arms crossed lightly. You look different when you're not afraid. I smiled faintly. Maybe I'm just tired of being afraid. He walked over and sat beside me. Good fear lies. I looked at him. Truth stays. That night, we didn't eat at opposite ends of the table. We sat close, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth from his sleeve. When he moved his hand as we lingered over dessert, made me ask, why did you say yes to this marriage? He didn't answer immediately. Then, because I was tired of women pretending to love me for what I owned, I thought maybe a transaction would be safer, easier. I swallowed. Now, he looked at me. His eyes weren't cold anymore. They were full, present. Now I see that you didn't come into my life to pretend. You came to remind me what it feels like to be looked at without expectation. I froze. He reached across the table and took my hand. Not firmly, just enough. I don't care about your past, he said. I don't care what you knew or didn't know before this. All I care about is how you make this house feel less empty. My throat tightened. He stood still, holding my hand, and pulled me gently to my feet. Then, with all the silence in the room wrapped around us, he whispered, "I love you." My knees nearly gave in. I hadn't even realized I needed to hear it, but I did. More than anything. I didn't say it back, not yet. Not with words. But I pressed my forehead against his chest, breathed him in, and let my hand rest over his heart. In that stillness, I knew he felt it. The truth. And that it would stay. It had been 3 months since that night, since the fireplace, since the words, since everything shifted, from contract to connection, from silence to truth. The house no longer felt like a museum of solitude. It felt lived in, breathing, like love had made its way into the walls. Damien changed, not overnight, but in real quiet ways. He lingered in the kitchen in the mornings just to hear me hum. He left small notes in my books, not romantic poetry, but thoughts, questions, little invitations to connect deeper. And when I sat by the piano, he always found an excuse to join me, even if it was just to sit in silence. We were learning each other, without pressure, without expectations. One Sunday morning, the garden was bathed in golden light. I was planting new lavender, sleeves rolled up, hair a mess, and dirt on my hands. I didn't hear him approach, but I felt it when he knelt beside me. I turned, laughing. "You're going to ruin those pants." "They're just pants," he said, brushing his hand on the grass. "Some things are worth ruining." I smiled, then froze as I noticed something in his hand. Small velvet, dark blue. "Damien?" He opened the box slowly. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a small sapphire at the center. Not flashy, not loud, just right. "You married me because we had no choice," he said. "Now I want to ask you again, this time with love." My eyes filled before I could even answer. He didn't rush me. I took the ring, slipped it on, and whispered the only words that mattered, "Yes. Always." He pulled me into his arms, and I felt it, not the heat of the sun, but the warmth of being truly chosen. Not for convenience, not for duty, but for love. In that moment, I knew some weddings begin in silence, but the best stories bloom from the unexpected. If this story touched your heart, leave a sparkling heart in the comments and let me know if you believe that even the coldest hearts can learn to love. Don't forget to subscribe for more emotional journeys like this one, and check the next story waiting for you on the final screen. It might be the one your heart's been searching for.